Welcome everybody. I hope you guys had a good week. Today, I want to talk about the importance of having thick skin when you are an animator professionally and how that actually will make or break you in terms of your career and how successful you can be as an animator in this industry. So, without further ado, let's get started with this episode. Cool. So I hope you guys had a good week and I'm glad to see you all here again. Now, I was thinking about this the other day and thinking about the fact that having thick skin really is what makes or breaks animators in this industry, because there's a lot of different things that can get in your way. And most of the stuff that actually gets in your way is psychological, most of it. And it's normally to do with how you actually perceive feedback, for example, or being under pressure for a long period of time, especially in games, and knowing how to deal with it, right? Also, and most importantly, is the fact that you can actually be working on something for 3, 4 years, 5 years, and then have it tank, like have it be unsuccessful after you spend all the time working on it and following people's kind of like direction. And then ultimately as well, sometimes you have leaders, directors, people that are in charge that don't really know what they're doing, and yet you need to do the job that they're paying you to do. So there's a lot of things, as you can see, in this industry that you need to kind of develop a thick skin in order for you to kind of like prevail, be successful, and see it through, right? So I'm going to tell you guys about a few stories from my background, and then I'm going to tell you all how I actually dealt with it, because a lot of the stuff that I had to deal with has been very important for me to get to the point that I can now be an animation director and deal with all kinds of stresses, sometimes more, sometimes less, and still not break under pressure. And I hope this serves as lessons or as examples to you guys, so you can also kind of like make the most out of your career. So the very first time in the games industry that I started developing thick skin was when I was QAing for a certification for Microsoft. It was in this company called VMC, and what happened is that I had to QA games. I had to kind of like test games, and most games you had to QA for about a week or 2 weeks. Actually, just so you guys know, certification is like when a game goes gold, they have to send it to Microsoft or Sony, whatever platform they need to publish it in, and then Microsoft and Sony have this big handbook that all publishers need to follow, and they need to actually kind of like, all games need to follow every single rule in that notebook to make sure that they make the most out of the game and they can pass certification. Only once passed the certification, they can go into the consoles, they can make it into the publishing part of the game. Now, I was one of the guys that actually is QAing for the certification, making sure that the game makes it into the console, and in this case it was the Xbox, and it was the original Xbox, so, because, I'm old. And we were like kind of like making sure that we tested all kinds of games. I remember testing, Halo 2, for example, or Knights of the Old Republic, and Red Dead Revolver, like the very first Red Dead. Things like that. A lot of fun, cool times. Now, the tough lesson that I learned there is that you were contracting. Therefore, I was loving the fact that I was working games somewhat, and you could only come back week upon week if you did a job really well the previous week. So what this entailed is that you had to play games fast and well, and make sure that you found as many bugs as possible, to make sure that the game was clean as possible. Now, if you were a slow player or you couldn't finish the game on time, even though it's a game that is really long, you have to spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, making sure that you finish that game and making sure that you find as many bugs as possible. So that was really stressful. So I was working in games, but I was not having fun playing games. For me, it was all about the marathon, making sure that you actually kind of like keep on top of it, making sure that you finish your games, making sure that you get bugs, making sure that you get called another week, because if I didn't, there was no money to pay rent. So that was an interesting lesson to learn, because it turns out that playing games is not always fun. Sometimes it's work. So the second experience that I had was actually working at Sega, because then I kind of shifted into full-time QA, and my job was at Sega, and I was testing a bunch of games from Sega, something like Full Auto or Outrun or Rome, Football Manager. There was quite a lot of games. So I spent at Sega maybe 2 years, 3 years QAing for them, and it was a lot of fun. Had a lot of friends. We became super tight. It was like a family. We used to hang out all the time, go for drinks all the time. It was amazing. Now, all of that ended with a sour note, because what happened was that I was kind of like fired for no reason. They kind of just took me on the day that I just came to work in a normal day. They took me upstairs, they took me to the office, they said don't come into the QA area, took me to an office, and then they basically asked me for my badge, and they said, here's the security guys, they will escort you downstairs now through the window, make sure you don't come back to this building, make sure you never come back here. And I was baffled by it, and I kept asking why was I fired. Supposedly I was not doing a good job, but I couldn't see it because as far as I was aware, I was doing a good job. So I feel like what happened is that they changed management, something happened there, and they had to kind of like dismiss certain people. I was one of them. It's unfortunate. But it was actually all for the benefit, once again, of thinking that not everything is a given, and even when you are incredibly stable and you think that the job is there for you all the time in a company that is stable, sometimes things are not so. So another lesson well learned. Now, the final lesson that I think that I should share with you guys was even harder than the previous two. The lesson was that I started actually working in Eurocom, my very first job in the first company, feeling good, feeling great. And at some point in time, this game they were working on called GoldenEye for the Wii, was basically a reboot of the original GoldenEye for the Wii. Really good game, came out, great reviews, was happy days. But throughout the development, at some point, they wanted to add a dog that felt really good, a dog that actually felt organic, and that it could be interacted with. Now, they couldn't really capture dogs at that point, so they decided to kind of like give it to an animator so they could actually animate it. So I was lucky enough that they gave it to me. They thought I was the man for the job. Great times. I took it as a challenge because I hadn't made a lot of animations for creatures at that point. So I was like, yeah, great. I'm gonna practice and hopefully knock it out the park if I apply myself. So I spent about 3 months and a half animating a dog, and the dog was looking great. Everyone was loving this dog, and everybody's going, yeah, once he's in game, I think it's going to scare a lot of players because they can interact with, the player's not going to see it, they're going to come around the corner, the dog is going to start barking, they're going to start kind of like chomping at the player if they need to. It was great. It was a great idea. Awesome. Now, I was just an animator at that point. I just made it into mid-level animation. So something happened up in the echelons of like directors and all that stuff, and then it trickled down all the way to me. And then finally my lead at the time told me, like, took me aside, and after 3 months and a half of work, he told me that basically the dog was no longer going to make it into the game. It was canned and it was kind of gone from existence. Now, I managed to rescue one clip, which I'll insert here, of the dog that I did, and this was blocking, and I was feeling it, and I don't know, I felt like it was going to be great. But to me, it felt like a massive, I don't know, I felt a little bit like I was so invested into this, and it was so personal to me to actually make this the best dog possible. And when it didn't happen, it was a little bit heartbreaking, right? And I kind of brushed it aside, but I did thought about it for the next months, because when you go through an experience like that, you kind of think, then anything I do after, is it still going to be the same thing? Can it be canceled at any point? Is it worth me spending so much time and effort on doing something? The answer is yes. And with this, the end of the story is this. And this is what I wanted to do, make these videos for you guys. Developing thick skin is really important, and you need to go through experiences like I just mentioned before in order for you to have that thick skin. It's not something that you are born with. It's really weird for you to actually spend so much time animating and then somebody else kind of like coming along and be like, this looks rubbish, do it again, or then I'll give it to another animator, and being harsh with their feedback. Now, over time, you'll eventually detach yourself a little bit more from your work. And this is where it's difficult, because it's a fine balance between caring a lot about your work, but also being detached to the point that if somebody comes along and tells you this can no longer happen, throw it in the bin, then you're going to be okay with this situation, and then you can pick yourself up and then go back and then start animating something else. It really comes with experience. There's no other way for me to explain this besides telling you that it comes with time, and you just have to be patient, because the more times you go through the cycle of like doing something that you're passionate about, animation, right in the beginning, you do one shot, somebody comes along and tells you that it's not good enough, you need to try again, and then you keep doing it all the time. Eventually, that feeling that you have in the beginning, which is probably going to be anger, and then disappointment, and then just sadness, to eventually go back to the, okay, now I have to pick myself up and then I have to animate again, and then you go back to the beginning and start over again. The more times you go through this cycle, the more resilient you're going to become to negative feedback, especially if you work with somebody that gives you harsh feedback. This might sound counterproductive, because I believe that the feedback should be constructive, but sometimes you do find people in the industry that will give you like black and white feedback. This is not good, do it again. You've done it before, how comes it's not better? If you don't do it again, I'll give it to somebody else. When are you going to learn? Things like this. Things that actually hurt, because not only are they talking about your animations and your skill, but it also makes you feel like this is not for you animation, right? So make sure that if this happens to you or is happening right now, that you are resilient enough to know that you are talented, that you deserve to be there, whatever you need to be right now or whatever you are right now, and you just have to go through it and apply yourself and make sure that you show them that you are a really good animator. They just can't see it just yet, right? So this is why I actually wanted to make this video, to kind of like empower you guys to know that a lot of bad stuff will happen to you as an animator, most likely. Feedback, not always great depending on the person, and you need to be resilient. You need to be really resilient in this industry in order to make it, because if you are, and if you have developed this thick skin, you will become a successful animator, because you will go through trials and tribulations, but you will make it to the other side. And once you do, you'll feel even more proud than if it was super smooth and there was nothing that actually was in your way. Having hardships through a project, for example, a game that lasts a long time, 5 years, let's say, those trials and tribulations that you go through while you actually developing the game is what makes the game memorable in your mind, especially if it's positive experiences that you had. So think about that. Make sure that you actually keep like being resilient, keep strong, believe in yourself more than ever, and make sure that you kind of like listen to videos like this from time to time, so you can remind yourself that, you know, animation is tough. You know, it looks great when it's finished, but the journey to get there is incredibly tough, even after you make it into being a professional animator. So that is the message for this video. I hope it resonates with you guys, and I hope it helps you guys. Now, before I go, as always, I want to give a massive shout out to my Patreons, people that have been kind of paying monthly to support me in this channel to make these videos. Major shout out to them. Here's their names. They are actually all epic, and I appreciate the support. If you'd like to consider supporting me in Patreon, please head over so you can be a supporter too. Now, that's all I had for you guys this week. I hope you guys have a continuation of a great week, and until next week, stay well, stay safe. Peace.